The Galactic Council had been very clear in their directive. After humanity's admission into the greater community of spacefaring civilizations, they were expected to adhere to the warfare limitation protocols established 3 millennia prior. Article 7, Section 12 explicitly prohibited the use of primitive kinetic projectile weapons in any sanctioned conflict. The reasoning was sound, the Council representatives assured Earth's diplomats. Such weapons were relics of a barbaric past, rendered obsolete by plasma rifles, ion cannons, and electromagnetic pulse weapons. Commander Sarah Chen stood in the armory of the ESS Defiance, running her fingers along the polished curve of an English longbow. It was made of yew, crafted by artisans who had studied techniques dating back to medieval England. Beside it hung row after row of crossbows, recurve crossbows, compound crossbows, even reproductions of ancient Chinese repeating crossbows. The scent of wood and oil filled the air, a stark contrast to the sterile corridors of the rest of the ship. "They think we're insane," Lieutenant Marcus Webb said, hefting a heavy crossbow with a draw weight that would have made a medieval knight weep with envy. "The Valorians are laughing at us across every communication channel," Sarah smiled grimly. "Let them laugh." The Council's lawyers were very specific. They banned gunpowder weapons, railguns, and anything using chemical propellants or electromagnetic acceleration. They never imagined anyone would go backwards. The war had started over a mining dispute in the Kepler 442 system. The Valorian Empire, a warrior culture that had dominated their sector for 500 years, had decided that humanity's claim to the mineral-rich asteroids was an insult to their honor. When diplomatic channels failed, they issued a formal declaration of combat, expecting the primitive humans to surrender immediately. They had not expected humans to accept. The first engagement took place near the third moon of Kepler 442b. The Valorian warships advanced in their traditional formation, shields blazing with the telltale shimmer of anti-energy barriers, their plasma cannons charged, ready to reduce the human vessels to ionized dust. According to every tactical simulation run by their war computers, this would be a massacre. The ESS Defiance and her sister ships hung in space, seemingly defenseless. No energy signatures indicated charging weapons. No electromagnetic pulses suggested railgun preparation. The Valorians opened fire, their plasma bolts streaking across the void. Then the humans returned fire. The first volley seemed impossible. Thousands of projectiles launched from modified cargo bays, moving at speeds that defied the Valorian sensors. These weren't energy weapons, so the shields barely registered them. These weren't explosive missiles, so point defense systems didn't engage. They were arrows, carbon fiber arrows tipped with tungsten, launched from massive ship-mounted ballistae that used mechanical tension and gravitational assists to achieve terrifying velocities. A Valorian destroyer lost its communications. A ray, as a cluster of crossbow bolts, punched through the unshielded sensor dome. Another took critical damage when a ballista-launched spear, weighing 300 kilograms and moving at relativistic speeds, penetrated deep into its engineering section. In the vacuum of space, there was no air resistance to slow the projectiles. Physics became humanity's greatest ally. Captain Theron of the Valorian flagship Crimson Honor watched in disbelief as his fleet began to take casualties from weapons his ancestors might have used 10,000 years ago. "How is this possible?" he roared. "They're using sticks and string." His tactical officer's face had turned an unhealthy shade of purple. "Sir, the projectiles are moving too fast for our shields to register them as threats. They're solid matter, not energy. Our defenses are optimized for modern weapons. These primitive weapons are bypassing every system we have." On the Defiance, Sarah watched the tactical display with satisfaction. Humanity had spent 6 months preparing for this moment. Engineers had worked around the clock, scaling up ancient siege weapons to ship-mounted proportions. Material scientists had developed arrows and bolts that could survive the friction of atmospheric exit and the cold of deep space. Physicists had calculated trajectories that used gravitational slingshots and orbital mechanics to multiply the kinetic energy of each projectile. And soldiers had trained. Thousands of men and women had learned the art of archery, not with traditional bows, but with the massive mechanical systems that could launch projectiles across thousands of kilometers of space. They had studied medieval warfare, siege tactics, and the physics of unpowered flight. "Load the second volley," Sarah commanded. "Aim for their engines." Let's see how their honor handles being crippled by cavemen. The battle lasted 4 hours. By the end, the Valorian fleet was in full retreat, 16 ships destroyed or disabled, their survivors bewildered by the impossibility of their defeat. Not a single human ship had been lost, though several bore scars from plasma fire. News of the engagement spread through the Galactic Council like wildfire. Military analysts across a dozen species scrambled to understand what had happened. The humans had exploited a loophole so obvious that it had been invisible. In the rush to ban primitive weapons, the Council had assumed no one would ever use them again. Why would they, when modern weapons were so much more effective? But the Council had forgotten a fundamental truth about humanity. Humans were creative, stubborn, and absolutely willing to embrace the absurd if it gave them an advantage. They had taken weapons banned as primitive and proven that in the right context, with the right engineering, primitive could be devastating. Within weeks, the Council amended Article 7, Section 12 to include any and all kinetic projectile weapons, regardless of propulsion mechanism. But the damage was done. Humanity had earned their reputation as the species that won a space battle with bows and arrows. Sarah Chen kept that first longbow in her quarters, mounted above her desk. It served as a reminder that in warfare, as in life, the most dangerous assumption was that old methods were obsolete. Sometimes the oldest solutions were the best ones, especially when no one saw them coming. The Valorians never challenged human territory again.